Hi there, welcome back to another small ramble video with me, writer and mental health advocate Dove Allen. I'm also one half of the BARROW Podcast, the show I do with my mum where we talk about divorce, dysfunctional families and mental illness while writing our memoir together. Why are we writing a memoir at all? I was recently asked this by somebody. Why are you writing this book? Why are you doing this project? The question was sort of like put to me more in terms of kind of like what's the end goal for the manuscript really? Like, you know, are you chasing fame or literary credibility or money, or is it about your career development in some kind of way? Like what's the goal here? What's the intended outcome? And I was kind of unsure, which is odd. Yeah, you would think that doing all this, you would surely you would know why you were doing it. But those questions are always the hardest, aren't they? Because, you know, your why, your reason, it is probably known to you, and it sits somewhere in the back of your mind, but it's never, or it's not always up the front. You know, you can't always grab onto it, and sitting down and actually thinking about why is important from a creative writing and, well, just creative practice point of view. It is good practice to sit down occasionally and really grill yourself, really ask some tough questions, like, why are you doing this? What's the intention of this? And what's this about? You know, what are the themes? What's the story? What's the point you're trying to get across? You do need to sort of interrogate yourself a little bit. And I hadn't done that for a while. I usually do it sort of, I don't know, kind of every 6 months or so. I'll sit down, I'll spend a day. I should do a video on that actually, sort of explaining what I do. But I hadn't done it for a while. And the question caught me, not off guard necessarily, but it just sort of, it just struck, you know. I was like, man, I haven't thought about that like properly. Why am I doing this? The person who asked me gave me, you know, a minute or so, and I sort of scrambled around for an answer. And I said, look, actually, it's got nothing to do with the book. You know, it's my goal for publishing the memoir is like, I just want it to be published by somebody, you know, because one, it's easier. It saves me having to self-publish it. But two, you know, I think it deserves to be published. So that's that. But that's not, there was no, truthfully, there's no sense of like literary career and credibility aspirations. And certainly there's no aspirations for fame or money, because there's not going to be any fame or money coming from doing a book. So the answer was emotional. And I maybe I surprised myself a little with the answer. The answer was, I think I said, because I wanted to be believed, or because I need to be believed, something like that. And I think that that's true for Mum as well, which perhaps sounds a little pathetic in a way and maybe a bit desperate. I feel like there's an interpretation of that answer that is not good. But how I meant it, I guess, is that, like, you know, I've had ups and downs with my mental health, of course. I've made some pretty big mistakes in my life that I'm, you know, not proud of. But throughout all of it, there's been this sense that, like, I'm not crazy. I remember the past. I remember my family. I remember the environment I was raised in. I remember the difficulties that we had emotionally. You know, like, they're in my bones, they're in my nervous system. And what I remember happened, you know. And I think I've carried that all my life and have always wanted, or needed even, again, I feel like that sounds a bit desperate, but it's not validation so much as just to have one other person say, no, you're right, you do remember that. I remember that too. That did happen. It was like that. And I suppose I always sensed that that person would be Mum, you know, that she is, or that she was always potentially capable of being like an ally in what we had experienced. Mum was just perhaps a little bit behind in her processing of things than I was, right? And she was coming at it all from a different angle, a different perspective. But I always believed there was a chance for us to salvage our relationship, and I wanted that. I needed that, you know, because there is just us. The nature of our relationship and our family dynamic, unfortunately means, well, unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know. There's just not many, there's not many people, you know, they're thin on the ground. We are both only children, and yeah, that really only leaves us with each other. And if I didn't, or we didn't do this, we wouldn't have a relationship, and by extension, we wouldn't have any family, and we wouldn't have anyone to validate the experiences and memories that we'd been through and that we have, you know. So it felt necessary to do this. It felt sort of impossible not to do it, and that's why this project exists. And you know, that's my honest answer. Why am I writing a memoir, or why are we writing a memoir? Because we had to. There's just no other way. And because I needed connection. I needed family. I needed to be believed. Yeah, that's the truth of it. I want the book to be published. I really do. I've been honest about that, I think, the whole time, you know. I'd be very disappointed if it's not. But that's not why. That's not why we're doing this. And I think that's a really good thing in a lot of ways, because I think it balances any of the expectations that I have for the project creatively. You know, if the project is a failure creatively, it's much easier to accept, because the project, for the fact that it exists at all, is a success, personally and emotionally. So in a lot of ways, it makes it easier to do. I mean, look, I've spoken about, actually I can link to one of the last ones of these that I did, where I talked about the fact that this project has not been easy to do at all. But because there's that need to do it, because it's necessary, or it seems to us to be necessary, there's no questioning doing it. There's a lot of questions about it, and there's a lot of self-doubt, and again, you can get that video. But there's never been a question as to whether to do it at all. The answer is always yes, like, we're doing it. It has to be done. So that does kind of balance things out in a nice way. And I will say that Mum and I are definitely unified in our need to be understood. I think for both of us, it's been a lifetime of feeling like, you know, there's not many people that get where we're coming from. So we are sort of essential to one another in telling our story, which is why it's co-authored, why it's a joint project. That's it for this one. If you've got your own story about, I don't know, anything related to this video at all, why have you done that thing that you have done creatively, and you feel like sharing it, then please do leave a comment down below. And as always, if you like this video, you'll definitely love the Barrow podcast, so come check it out. Links and further information can be found in the description for today's video, as well as on the homepage to this YouTube channel. Until next time, bye.